Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we have an immense love for the films of our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we are discussing Home Alone. It's released in 1990, directed by Chris Columbus, and stars Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, and Daniel Stern. This movie tells the story of a child left home alone during the holiday season, and shenanigans ensue. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 31-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we'll be revealing key plot points. I chose this film, so I'll open up our discussion. I have not watched this probably since the 90s. I can't imagine or think back on a time that I had seen it recently, even if it was something that I feel like is a movie that probably play on TV a lot. And I've come away, I think, slightly conflicted, maybe, because I do feel like for being a quintessential holiday Christmas movie, one that I have memories of watching over and over. Now as an adult, I'm like, there's a lot of cringe to it, especially at the beginning. And the reason I'm conflicted is because I almost feel like there's a point in the film, and I'm getting into it already. His parents realize that he's not on the flight to Paris with them, and it was really about there that I felt like I could get invested in what was happening. And really all that meant was I was here for all the gags. And I don't know what that says about it because I really enjoyed that part of the film and everything that happens from there. So we could talk about some of those a bit later. But it was one of these things where as it went through, I just wasn't sold at the beginning. And maybe I forgot how horrendous all of these people were, from the kid to the parents to the family, how terrible they treat each other, the intense amount of bullying that happens in that first 15 minutes. I was like, wow, all right, did I enjoy this part as a kid or did I not care? And maybe as a kid I think that I probably enjoyed the gags as well, and that is the part that is carried over through my adulthood. I like some shenanigans and people getting hit in the face with large blunt objects. So I'm still a bit conflicted. How did you guys feel about it?
I've watched this movie probably much more often than you have. It falls into my list of holiday movie watching, my 25 Days of Christmas. So I've seen it recently within the last year or two. So I don't have, I guess, the rose tinted glasses that I probably would have if I had watched it as a kid. I remember watching it as a kid, really loving the franchise, at least for the first two movies. I can't say I, on a personality level, related to Kevin as a character, but I very much saw myself in that character as far as the, creativeness and everything else. I remember wanting the Talk Boy from the second movie. Just being a technology nerd as much as I am, like I wanted it really bad. I think that this movie definitely falls into the must watch for the holiday season. It's like this, The Grinch, it's just one of those movies that you throw on during the holiday season. I don't know if it's a movie you're going to watch in June, right? But for sure, you're going to be watching it between December 1 and 25. It's always an enjoyable watch. I It's always interesting to think how long it takes to get to the buildup of the shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a good hour plus into the movie before what I think most people attribute to this franchise, which is the traps and all that. It takes a while to get there, and there's to its credit what this movie has, and I think it's the combination of Chris Columbus and John Hughes as the writer. There's a lot of character, maybe not building as much, but just characterization that happens between the beginning of it and when that stuff happens, where you get to see, Kevin being alone and going through the stages of, enjoying the freedom to the isolation and loneliness of being alone. And then even getting to, see, I think was his name Marley, the snow shovel guy. You get to, see bits and pieces of, his life. And so you get these elements of what family means and what the holidays mean kind of mixed in. And then you get to the shenanigans, and then you get the classic slapstick type humor. So it's a fairly strong story from that point of view, right? That you even get to do that. The later movies didn't do that. They almost immediately go straight to the slapstick. The heart of the story is kind of lost
Mm.
on the Tom and Jerry-esque aspect of it.
Yeah, it's one of those where, like you said, if I'm buying into the gags right now, it felt like I couldn't care about the characters until exactly what you're talking about. Maybe that hour in, even with the boneheadedness of both the criminals. I was trying to figure out, where was my investment point and feeling the care for maybe Kevin as a character being alone in this home. And I think you nailed it with sort of that progression. One of the steps is kind of even representing him in adulthood as he goes shopping to buy groceries and essentially comment that at the end to his family. But watching that change, it's still tied into the again, I'm still tied to like the gags that went around it, to even though they plugged those things in, that time that it took to get to that point, there's an element of it dragging a bit for me. How about for you, Bobby?
Yeah, like Matt. So I've seen this movie kind of recently, after not having seen it in a while, and even having seen it fairly recently, like maybe a year or two ago. I still kind of in my mind like just thought that that was more like the Tom and Jerry Looney Tunes like gag aspect of it was much more of the movie than it actually was. It's basically the very end of the second act slash, maybe beginning of the third act. And it was interesting because a lot of it was build up to that. But I like what you said, Matt, about the quintessential Christmas story, which is like, okay, like all these Christmas movies have a theme, right? Which is like the spirit of the holidays, of like family and, like peace on earth, being better to each other. And I mean, this movie really did a good job with that, with the heart, like especially with the Marley character, the snowplow guy, and how Kevin and him really have like a heartfelt conversation, even though he's afraid of him. It's just like kind of like those kind of things, like really like just nail in the whole like holiday movie. And I think one of the reasons why that it works so well, and that it's really like one of those staying holiday movies that a lot of people are watching every holiday. And yes, not in July and June, but seeing it there. And I think it really worked. I mean, watching it again, like there were some things that like, I mean, I caught, or like maybe I didn't really catch, but I thought, okay, like this is interesting. Like just watching this, like there was pretty early on, like Kevin's was breaking the fourth wall and staring at the camera, and it was very like tongue in cheek kind of thing a lot,
What is
and
this,
there
The
was,
Office?
yeah, it was like it was very tongue in cheek, like the way they did it, with the like and then even showing in some cases, like showing it from a kid's point of view, like with the basement, saying like, oh, like the basement's scary, and that whole like furnace situation. And then even like when he's out shopping, like it's not like as an adult would shop, it's as a kid would think that an adult would shop, right? Like, oh, like I'm an adult, I should ask questions about things like toothbrushes, and like act like adults, like how like a 9 or 10-year-old kid would think that adults would act. And I do think that there's a lot of really interesting things about this movie that give it the staying power.
But I have to ask, when you speak to Marley and you talk about the character Kevin having a connection with an adult in the film, why is it the scary stranger across the street? I mean, you get to the reunion point right at the end, and I still don't feel like they loved him, because all of a sudden they come in, he gets a, "Oh, you did good, bro. You didn't burn the house down, little one." And then the next thing you know, it's another scene where he's just kind of like walking alone, and they all went off. To me, the idea of a parent genuinely forgetting their child on a vacation trip, I guess in a sense, I wanted that to be more elevated.
Well, I think the problem is that the movie isn't really about that. It's about like growing and, like loving your family and, like all those Christmas kinds of things. And I think the whole Home Alone kind of idea is just a gag in order to get like the character to grow.
I
And the
do.
Would you
mom,
love your family after this? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I do also watching again, especially watching with you guys. I do think that one of the things they probably could have done better, that would have maybe drove it home a little bit more, is if they might have done a different job on how they characterized the rest of his family. Like if they would have had it so that the family wasn't, so much of, just being a jerk to him, because it was definitely on both sides, right? Both sides were kind of being jerks to each other.
yeah, that's one thing I
Mhm.
thought was like, there's so many jerks back and forth. It's like, why is Kevin the one who's singled out and why is he the one who's thrown away and grounded or whatever when the uncle guy and of course the brother and some of the others like seem to do just as egregious things as all the others did.
Maybe it's, I can't remember where I watched it now, but it's not necessarily that he's somehow singled out. Maybe it's just because his response back are like way sharper. He has a sharp tongue, and so like his stuff cuts deeper.
Mhm.
Right.
Whenever he breaks out the insults or says anything, it just tends to hit home. Whenever he does it, I do think that the disconnect that Austin was talking about as far as the ending, because it very much seems like the Catherine O'Hara's character, the mom, maybe she kind of goes through a arc of kind of seeing the error of her ways, that maybe she didn't pay as much attention to Kevin as a mom.
Mhm.
And so just the act of and everything she goes through, and writing with the Polka Kings and everything else, or whatever, just kind of, especially like hearing the terror stories that their kids or whatever went through, and everything else that had happened. I guess she had kind of had an arc, but the rest of the family didn't really seem to
Mhm.
by the end. I do think that the connection between Kevin and Marley is a lot more apparent in the fact that they're both loners in their families in a way,
Mm.
Right.
and
Yeah,
they're
good point.
isolated. Whether or not I feel like it was necessarily as deserved on the Kevin side is up for debate. They did try to present it that way. I think that maybe they could have done it a little bit better, especially considering how long it takes to get to the shenanigans part of it. So
Mhm.
you are just building character at that point. But I guess to get to the Home Alone aspect of it, they really needed to kind of cut some of the stuff short, right? Um, and it might even have been possible that them being jerks to Kevin might have been a story element to explain why they don't notice that he's not on the bus and not on the plane, that they really don't care about him. But again, you know,
Yeah, I mean, setting it up so the parents are in first class and just assuming that the kids are all good back there, but then every single bit of his family members, the others are like, "Oh, he's just in a seat on his own somewhere random on this plane to Paris."
Right, well, they even said it in the movie. Didn't the girl say in French or whatever that he's like inconsequential?
Mhm. Or incompetent. I can't remember the exact French phrase. So I'll switch it over. How do we feel about Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern?
who, I think that they play the roles well for what they're supposed to be. It's weird to see Joe Pesci in a comedic role when I'm used to seeing him in legit gangster movies,
Mhm.
Yeah,
where even though
definitely.
he's a smaller guy and everything else, he kind of plays that into his character type, where like funny how, right,
Mhm. Right.
and so seeing him in this kind of comedic role, uh it's kind of strange to watch sometimes. um I think that they played the types well. I think that you can't take the characters too seriously. Like you could easily break down this movie and the thing could have ended in like 5 to 10 minutes if they were competent thieves and bandits, if someone called 911, if if there's like 15 different things you could probably do to end this movie quickly. But I think for what their characters needed to be, I think that they did a good enough job at it. I think they played good villains for Kevin's character. I don't know if they really developed the characters well enough, by modern movie villain standards, but
Mhm.
you know,
So I have a question for you. Is are are they? I mean, I understand that they're very necessary in terms of gags and making the movie much funnier and elevating the movie, but in terms of Kevin's development, is him being left not traumatic enough and then them coming back, or are they necessary to his development and the story arcs and the story
I
process?
mean, isn't this some really serious trauma? Not only is he left
Yeah.
alone, the house is getting burglarized. Holy
Right.
shnikes.
Well, like it sounds like the Home Alone version you're writing in your head, Bobby, is a drama, maybe thriller, like compared to a comedy, adventure type story.
I mean, story-wise, it almost seems like, okay, like his trauma was being left alone. I mean, at the beginning, he was like, "Hey, this is great. I could do whatever I want, like eat piles of ice cream and watch movies I'm not supposed to watch, you know. This is really, really great." And it takes him a good while to think like, "Hey, like I'm starting to miss my family." But the really interesting thing was he wasn't missing his family because he's not capable of taking care of himself. He was very
Mhm.
capable of like, like bathing himself and they were all surprised at the end. They're like, "Hey, this kid can't even tie his shoes. Like how did he go shopping?" Like he's very capable of taking care of himself. It's not like he required his family for general sustenance. He required them for love.
So, but your argument is you don't think that they were even necessary in the story?
Well, I mean, like, I know that for sure in terms of elevating the movie and frankly making it a movie, I think that they were very necessary. But I mean, in terms of when you get down to the real like arc and character development and all that kind of thing, I think they were just like the cherry on the top. I don't think they were actually necessary to the story. Like, I think if you remove them entirely, he's still home alone, he still like achieves his main goal. I mean, they didn't really like do anything besides terrorize him and leave a tooth.
This does sound like a more serious, dramatic version of watching a child wallow in ice cream, be sad, stare into the mirror,
Right,
throw on
that's exactly
aftershave.
why this movie needs to be a comedy the way it is, right? That's what exactly why like it needs to be like Looney Tunes. Even like the furnace and
Mhm.
the
Thank you for
like
bringing up the furnace. Can someone explain to me why there is a demon home furnace?
Oh, I think it's because it's showed by the perspective of the child, and in a child's mind, like you've had the thing of like, okay, like you look at a shadow and the shadow on the wall looks like a monster or something, or like, as soon as you turn off the lights, the eyes
But
pop out.
but if we
It's
had
like the
all these
Ichabod Crane situation where all of a sudden all the trees are very ominous looking.
but we've had you explained all those other growth points for his character. And the one that they have to throw in there, the most fantastical element is this thing just to be like, oh, by the way, at some point I went down into the basement and I thought it was okay. And he had to explain that to us. Eh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was part of just his arc of saying like, "Hey, like this is was a learning experience for me. I was pretty selfish at the beginning, and like I've stepped outside of myself for a brief moment, looked around me, noticed that I'm not the main center of the universe. I've been able to take a step back, get my 100-foot view of everything, look and see what everybody's role in this whole world is, and see what my role in this world is, and realize that, okay, like I could be a better person moving forward."
Good Lord, Kevin should teach a philosophy class after that one. I love everything you said, but that is heavy duty. I will pivot back to the gag because I do want to know. Do you have a favorite gag?
I like the flamethrower on the head, not only because I mean it's the epitome of just like dangerous, crazy. A kid would not be able to set anything up like that. It's like it's impossible for it to happen. But I
In
also
an
think
hour.
that it was a very
Don't forget
interesting behind
he
the
did it
scenes
all in an hour.
situation.
He set
Right.
it all up in an hour.
Yeah.
I I think I have two for two completely different reasons. The ones that stick in my mind, anyways, like long term from when I first watched it as a kid. The first one, and I don't know why, it's the paint can gag. I don't know why, but it always kind of sticks in my mind. I think they might have even used it in the sequel too, using paint cans on ropes. And the other one's the nail on the stairs.
Okay,
I
yeah,
still,
nail on the stairs
still
is
watching. I still wince whenever I see
It's
that.
cringy.
Yeah, I think you're getting into the parts that I enjoyed the most were those bits that that I felt like the pain was in me at the same time, which is definitely him stepping on the nail, which started it, and then crawling into the window to step on the broken glass when you know those feet were already full of like a nail.
Yeah.
Oh boy, my entire body was shivering at the thought of just having that experience.
And realistically, he should have still had some of that tar stuff on his feet, so the glass should have stuck. And like he should have been like constantly like, there's no way that these guys are either superhuman or it's just like one of those things where they just had to ignore pain and physics in order for the story to continue, because within the first 5 minutes of that sequence, they would have been out.
Oh, without question.
I got a pretty solid laugh out of the like the feathering, the like tar and feathering scene where he's just standing there and it just puffed all around him. For some reason, I laughed out loud in that moment. It just looked really funny to me.
That's one of the few more innocent like movie traps, to be honest.
Maybe that's why I thought it was funny. And the others, I'm just like, oh no, he's dead.
No, you're right. This all opens up with him shooting a gun at them. It was going to be violent from the get-go. So another question I have, was the neighbor really the snow shovel killer?
There's a little bit of truth and
oh no, don't say that, Bobby.
Like I feel like now in modern times or whatever, like somebody would kind of do like they did with the Scranton Strangler or whatever. They make a little making a murderer segment off the clips and stuff where it'd be like tracking the snow shovel killer.
Oh, that's brutal. Yeah, it was like, it's one of those things where I feel like I remember being kids say stupid things and you make up silly rumors that aren't even real. And I felt that at the beginning until he said, I know you've heard rumors about me. And I said, wait a second. Why would you tell the kid that? That's really creepy.
That kind of thing just screams to me writing, like clarifying, like, oh hey, this is the guy.
I'm not really a snow shovel killer.
Right.
Even though he wields that snow shovel with efficiency to knock out two criminals.
That scene was a little, I mean, there were some good moments in that scene, but there are also a little bit of like hand holding in terms of the writing, like there was, there's rumors about me. And there's also a really weird line to me, which was when an adult says to a child, what's your point? Right? Like it was just kind of like a stopping point to try to move forward in the conversation. And it just didn't ring to me like it's like a natural conversation point of.
Maybe it's back to giving credit to all the learnedness that he gained by being home alone.
Because it's like when he's like, what's your point? He's like, well, my point is that you're creepy, dude.
Which is super the case. I remember him distinctively freaking me out as a kid as well. Okay, so here we are. Sounds like since you guys both watch it on the regular, I have a feeling where you might go with this. But what are your recommendations, Matt? What are you telling people here in 2021? Should they be watching Home Alone
every Christmas season? Sure. I think that it's worth adding to your list. If you have some spare slots, throw the sequel on, but forget the rest of them.
Where do you put this one on your list of Christmas movies?
Oh, like, is this in my top 10?
Yeah.
Well, I definitely consider it more a Christmas movie than Die Hard, which I will go there. I would say this is
we don't have time for this conversation.
This is true. We'll have to have a whole other segment just for that.
Die Hard 2 is more of a Christmas movie.
Okay, you're done. Everybody's done. Continue, Matt.
I'd say this isn't my top 10, but probably not my top 5.
All right, Bobby, you recommending it?
I mean, I would recommend it just for its cultural relevance. I mean, recently, like there was a house close to where I live that they did a pretty good replica of, you know, the two guys like breaking into a house, and they did like the tree house and the zip line and all that kind of thing, and it did really good, and it gathered crowds. So there is some staying power in this movie, and I do think that it's a little bit more layered, and it's got all the good holiday feels that, you know, mixed in with some like comedic maiming.
So it's still good to show the kids today.
I'm not showing my 7-year-old daughter this movie. She's
Wait,
gonna have to wait a couple years.
That is a whole other conversation right there. Where are you ranking it on your top holiday movies?
It's not in my top 10. I'll just say that.
Wow, we are going to have a full top 10 ranking listing. You're pushing it outside of the top 10. You know, like I said, for me, it's been so long that I actually don't know where I would put it either. But I did come away still enjoying, again, all the shenanigans of this film. So I would recommend watching it. You're right, Matt. Maybe not in June, or maybe not when stores are doing Christmas in July and you're being fooled into buying stuff. Wait till December. Maybe it is something you're throwing on with your family just to have it on in the background. It kind of feels a little bit like a USA film in that sense to me. So, as always, thank you for listening. And remember, keep the change, you filthy animal.